We finally got her, the busiest woman in Texas. Nicole, thank you for finding a minute here to jump on with us and tell your SMU story. I know a lot of us, of our audience, saw you speak. I think that was back in January when we had you talk on a kind of the Texas Stock Exchange info luncheon. But now here we are to tell a little bit more about your story. So thank you for joining me. And for those who weren't there and haven't met you, please introduce yourself to our audience.
Well, thank you. Happy to be back, and I have more to say. So great timing. Nicole Chambers. I am class of 2006. I originally from San Diego, California, and like many SMUers, never left after college. I am now the global managing director of listings at the Texas Stock Exchange.
Amazing. So you're from California, San Diego, made your way to SMU. When I was at SMU, there was a lot of California folks. I think it still continues to be a great spot for those on the West Coast to find their way to Texas. What was your introduction to SMU, and kind of how you found the school when you were leaving high school?
Well, it was honestly the best decision I've ever made. It changed my life, but I didn't know about SMU at all. So I have to thank my college counselor. I was set to go to USC in Compton and was thrilled, but kind of thought, gosh, if I'm going to leave, I might as well really leave and do something that not all my classmates are doing. And so I had said, I want a great school with the football atmosphere, a good Greek life, an opportunity to get a good job after school in a big city. I just knew I didn't want to be in a small town. And he's like, well, there's this school in Dallas and it's just like USC, but in Texas. And it's Southern Methodist University. And my first thought was, well, I'm not Methodist, I don't think.
Right.
And turns out you don't have to be.
Yeah.
And I applied sight unseen, got in and immediately visited and was absolutely in love. So I changed my commitment over to SMU and the rest is history. It truly was a life-changing event for me and the best 4 years I could have ever imagined.
I hear a lot of people from the West Coast compare it to USC from maybe similar size, you know, great brand, good education. I think obviously they might have at the time better kind of that bigger sports. You mentioned some of the check boxes you wanted. Is it true, or how do they compare between the two as someone who was, happy to go to USC, but then found SMU as a perfect kind of alternative to be able to leave the state?
I mean, I will say I think I'm a stronger football fan because we were so horrible the 4
Yes.
year I was at SMU. And so now I truly appreciate the amazing sports atmosphere that we've created. And I can say
Right.
I am like tried and true. Like
Yep.
we've made it,
Yep.
knock on
Yep.
wood, as the football season's about to start. I think it's very similar. I do think SMU is a bit smaller, but I think truly it's similar in that it has such a great reputation. SMU has done so much for me from a legitimacy perspective. I think the appreciation of my education has truly been unreal. I think we all probably feel that way in that graduating, at this point, almost 20 years ago, the reputation of SMU has just continued to grow and get stronger, not just in the state, but nationally. And that has been a tremendous opportunity for me. USC, I think, has always had a great
Hmm.
legacy and a great, people recognize it. I don't necessarily know if it's appreciated as much as a school like SMU has in the last few decades. So I will
Agreed.
say, I think in that respect, it's been obviously a bit different, but similar ideas. And honestly, I don't think I was ever going to work in South LA. So I
Right.
would have had to move. I
For
mean, as
sure.
much of a great education as I'm sure that would have been, I'm thrilled I only had to go, a couple miles down 75 to get a job.
Yeah. So staying on brand with your background in the world, the SMU stock has been the the hockey stick growth, where maybe USC is a little more stable, but
Yeah.
that's an interesting thing to and from the USC perspective, growing up in California, is the alumni base is kind of strong as we see the SMU alumni base kind of band together that you see in Texas, and especially as we get more into your kind of work experience. Is that something that you've seen to be more powerful with the SMU brand?
I think so. And maybe that's just again because I have such an affinity
Wow.
for this community, but also I live in it. I do think, though, especially leaving California, Texas schools just have that type of true culture of community and like
Yep.
affiliation. I mean, people will know I'm a Mustang in the first probably 3 sentences. And
Right.
so
Right.
I think, if I was maybe from a school out west or even out east, I don't know if it would come up as quickly only because I'm so proud and
Yeah.
excited. And if I can find even somebody that's from a Texas school, even if they're a
Right.
rival,
Right.
it just makes that affiliation even stronger. So I do think, in my opinion, it definitely is a bit more of a rah rah. I went to this school mentality.
Yes. So, college counselor, we can thank them for getting you on campus. You visit, checks all the boxes. What's kind of your game plan going into school, right? You eh, take a bunch of classes. Did you know you were a finance business related person, or was law school on the horizon? How did you kind of view those 4 years on the hilltop about learning about yourself and what you wanted to maybe pursue as a career?
I grew up in a really like a big entrepreneur family. Both my dad and my grandfather were venture capitalists, and I didn't
Mm,
really even know what that was. I just knew that it was business,
okay.
and I thought, well, I probably should think about doing something where I know somebody that does it. I
Okay.
also don't know what a lot of other jobs are. When you're going to school,
Yeah.
you kind of just think of the traditional doctor, attorney,
Right. Right.
finance. And all I know is I'm not an art person. I'm the least
Mhm.
creative person. So I knew that
Mhm.
Meadows was not going to let me do anything there. But ultimately, I did. I took a bunch of classes and settled on economics and sociology just because I was super fascinated with the idea of macro structure and macro patterns. And also, they didn't take attendance. So it was a great fit for me.
Great for freshman, sophomore year for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Navigating a few social and school-oriented to-do lists for sure. That's amazing. I think a lot of people, you gotta figure those out in the first few years or so. When was it
Absolutely.
that you ultimately kind of started thinking about what the career choice might be at school? Was it kind of junior or senior year, or kind of what were you like a lot of us, where you're like, okay, let me just apply to a few different things and see what sticks?
I mean, to be honest, I feel like my career ideas, people would probably think I'm schizophrenic. I thought at first I was going to own and run a restaurant. That was an initial thought. So I was like, okay, I probably should go into business management.
Mhm.
And then I worked for Consilient at the time. They had Cuba Libre and Victor Tango's and all of those restaurants. And back in the day, and I quickly realized that's not the job I needed or
Yeah,
wanted because it was a 24/7, 7 day a week job, but just didn't really fulfill me like I thought.
for sure, for sure. Well, I think that's great. You're kind of learning all through that time. Like, obviously, you're interested in how a business runs, or kind of what you can do, but always having that entrepreneurial spirit. What led you kind of to that first job out of school, and then ultimately where we kind of build up to, but you ended up staying in Nasdaq for 17 years, right? So something stuck with that role. Talk us through how first job and then into Nasdaq, and kind of how that all started.
I will say, I think the biggest lesson learned, and as we talk about kind of my career track, is that things don't go as expected and to just say yes when you can. So I will say I had a job lined up as I was graduating in '06 to work at a law firm downtown Dallas. Is going to do marketing, business development. Certainly was something I was interested in. It seemed like a fun job and an ecosystem that maybe I would want to maybe learn more about, whether I go back and get my law degree or I just grow in that kind of business role of a law firm. And so I was thrilled. I had signed my employment paperwork. I had moved out of the Alpha Chi house. I was living with two other roommates, about to be. And 2 days before graduation and my parents flying out, I got a call saying that my position had been eliminated, as was the entire marketing department of the law firm.
Jeez.
So I was unemployed before I was employed. And that was,
Real world
terrifying.
hits you hard.
Yes. I was like, "Can I go back to the
Yeah,
sorority
yeah,
house? Because this is
exactly.
this is not
Yeah,
this is not fun."
yeah.
But ultimately, that manager that I would have had was very kind, and she called me and said, "I know a man that runs his business out of the West End in Dallas. It's a search firm. Have him meet with you. Go down there, tell him what you wanna do, and maybe he can place you somewhere since obviously I'm leaving you in kind of a difficult situation. So I had immediately called him, went down after graduation, was desperate at this point. I probably would have taken, a trash truck job, and that would have been fine as
Yep.
long as it paid my rent and
Yep.
allowed me to go to, Idle Rich. So, ultimately, ultimately, I met with him. David Cerami was just the best. He could not have been a nicer human. He was very interested in, what I wanted, how I spoke, what I did, and he offered me a job to work for him in his company at the search firm. So I immediately jumped into kind of a headhunting, marketing, recruiting role at the Cerami Search Group, and I did that for a year and a half. And it was honestly what has laid the foundation for my whole career, which is to be fearless. I think he had me reading out of a phone book, Yellow Pages, I think, even to just go law firm by law firm or firm by firm and make calls, cold calls, to see who would want to use his company to place, whether it be paralegals or attorneys or legal secretaries, you name it. And so I got a real taste of true cold calling, salesmanship, and really a great foundation for what I've been able to do since then.
Have you always felt that you had a knack for being able to talk to anybody and kind of have that energy when engaging with someone? Or is that something you learned in kind of this first role?
I think it came about, to be honest, because of Rush at SMU. I will say, like, people will make of it what they want, but
Yeah.
going through Rush and, talking to strangers
Right.
that you have to get to know in a short amount of time,
Yeah.
multiple times a day for just again, like I said, a short time, you learn to connect with people. You learn with how to make people feel comfortable and ultimately maybe get a little bit more out of them than
Yeah.
acting a different way. So molding yourself a bit, but also still being authentic and showing, who you are. I will say has that really was a
Yeah.
tremendous learning curve. And I think that really set me up for that type of fearlessness in my first role. And then obviously built upon that.
And you've had, employees who work for you now and you even have young kids. Are you seeing that as a skill set that's kind of going by the wayside? People are lacking in their interpersonal, the ability to connect with people, or is that something you still see throughout your roles, or is that something that's allowed you to remain successful is because you've continued to light that flame?
I think I will say kind of yes to all of it, in that, yes, sadly, I don't think that interpersonal skill is as strong as it could be. Obviously, I did not grow up, I was born in 84. So I grew up one of those millennials that didn't have technology and then did have technology. And
Hmm.
so, I wasn't forced into just learning a certain way and
Yeah.
interacting with people a certain way and meeting people in real life and having to have that conversation and relationships. So I will say I think that was a big benefit. I do think, there are some folks that we interview today and, they just maybe haven't had to have that time with others in that type of relationship. But I also see it as really one of the only jobs technology can't replace is
Right.
relationship. And you have to have the ability to step outside of yourself. And I've been nervous many a times or feel uncomfortable being the only person that, is in a room of people that know each other. But I will say that, those situations make you a stronger, whether it's a leader, whether it's just, a mother or a friend or, anybody that you're trying to be. And I do hope that that changes as we have new graduates come about. So I will say that would be a huge skill to take from this is um, learn how to
Yeah.
talk to a wall. And
Totally.
then but I do love it. I mean, I do, like I said, I don't think AI can replace my jobs that I've had, and that it requires human interaction and understanding of the person sitting in front of you. So I
Yeah.
think that that's been a flame that I definitely, have not put out.
So jumping back to jobs, maybe people don't think they exist. I think we all, maybe at least for me, you take for granted the Nasdaq and these exchanges, and that they just kind of operate themselves, or some governing body make sure it all works, and then next thing you know, you're able to trade on it and everything. How did that opportunity come about? And walk us through that career of 17 years, starting as a new entrant to where you ultimately led to where the Texas Stock Exchange realized they needed you to be able to grow and be where we are today.
Yeah, again, I go back to, like, it's who I know. I hate to say that, and I think that's why networking is so important. I mean, obviously, having great credentials and being a strong candidate on paper is important, but also making sure you build that network. I was 23. I was happy at Cerami Search Group, but I also knew that, it was a 3-person company. I wasn't necessarily going to be able to, spread my wings. And I didn't also know if I wanted to keep cold calling out of a Yellow Pages.
Yeah.
And, my roommate at the time, Shannon, her married name is Shannon Neal, but it was Shannon Clark, also class of 2006. So shout out to Shannon. She was with the Dallas Regional Chamber, and Nasdaq had hosted an event, and they had mentioned, "Hey, we really want to build a team in Texas." Being a New York company, they recognize that Texans want to work with
Yep.
Texans. The flying in was not necessarily as delightful of an
Nope.
experience for
Mhm.
these companies. And they asked her, would you be open to a sales role here? And she had said no, but I actually have a roommate that might be. So it just turned into a very warm introduction. And, certainly I was young. I did not even know NASDAQ, like you said, had employees. I just kind of
Right.
thought of it as like an entity or like a UFO or something just that
Right. Right.
happened.
Yep.
So I, felt very out of place, and that I don't even think I could study enough because I don't even think I knew what to learn about the exchange.
Right.
There's so
Yeah.
much. But going back to stay true to myself, authentically myself, admitted what I didn't know, admitted what I did know. I luckily have a dad that's from Greece. The man that I interviewed with was Greek, so that connection super helped
Huge.
too. Greeks love Greeks, just like
Yeah.
Texans love Texans. And I was very happy. I started as a junior associate sales specialist in the services wing of NASDAQ, and again, changed my life. I was joined in February 2008, and then the financial crisis hit, I think just 3 months later. And I couldn't figure out why everybody was not hysterical, but things
Right.
were on
Right.
fire. And
Right.
I'm just like, what is my computer password? So, I was definitely thrown into a fire, but learned so much, but always remote. So I worked remote from '08 to 2025
Wow.
and grew my career as organically as I could, starting super young as a junior associate and into sales, and then from sales into managing accounts and working with accounts across the entire US, both New York and NASDAQ. And then when opportunities came up for me to work in listings, I said yes. And, I recognize being an employee in Texas with a New York headquarters, I had to say yes when I could, right? I wasn't gonna have the opportunity if there wasn't a job here that was created for me, then there was not a job here. So I was always, open-minded and definitely eager to take on more. So by the end of my time at NASDAQ, I was in charge of IPOs and retention for listed companies in the Southwest, and certainly had every intention of staying. I loved everybody I worked with. I learned so much. It was a great brand, a great leadership team. And again, I wasn't unhappy, and it let
Yeah.
me have my kids and work remote and do my things that I needed to do during that time of my life.
Can you share a little bit about what kind of sales, what those roles look like in an exchange like Nasdaq? What is it identifying a company that might be going public and kind of what that pitch is and what you're trying to achieve, and then the account management side and kind of the life cycle of a sale to a client of of something like Nasdaq?
Sure. Well, in the world of public companies, up until TXSE, there was only two choices. It's a Coke and
Uh-huh.
Pepsi situation, right? You had to pick New York Stock Exchange or NASDAQ. So it was interesting sales cycle and that you always knew who you were up against.
Mhm.
And there was no other choice unless they just chose, unless they were bought or they just stayed
Yep.
private. So, you every day were going head to head with the same people, whether it be the people literally that I worked, against in Texas or
Yeah.
the same firm. So, ultimately you had to prove that trading aside, right? Because trading is going to happen regardless of me ever meeting with a company that's listed. Obviously, that's the
Mhm.
part that has to work. If it doesn't work, then one exchange would have more companies than the other. My role was to really help give companies an understanding of how to be a partner with these,
Mhm.
pre-IPO companies. How could we further a brand? How could NASDAQ help, with IR services and get them
Mhm.
more public company ready or offer a network? So, it was trying to puff up your chest more than the
Yeah.
competitor was. And so bringing companies public. And, that's not necessarily easy because companies don't have to go public. I mean,
Right.
sometimes they do if you're a biotech looking to raise capital, but,
Yeah.
you're I would start out working with companies that are in a Series B or Series C raise and working with those founders or executives over the course of many years. I mean, ideally, like I said, going back to relationships, in order to succeed, I can't come in the day you need to make a decision. That's
No.
never going to work. And on paper, we look they either look the same or one can just up their option a little bit. And
Yeah.
it's that emotional relationship, the professional relationship, the ability to say I followed through on actions that I've said in the past. That's what really helped Nasdaq win, was the boots on the ground idea. And on the account management side, once they are public, the goal is to not let them leave, right? You have to keep them on the ad exchange. The
Yeah.
exchanges, are as strong as the logos that are on them. And so New York and NASDAQ spend every single day trying to poach each other's companies to make their
Mhm.
exchange stronger. So my role there was to keep the relationships I developed with executives and the board on making sure that they felt we were doing as much, NASDAQ was doing as much as could be done to support them and make sure that they were aware that NASDAQ was available for X, Y, and Z things to do. So,
Yeah.
again, going back to relationships and cultivating relationships, I've had the opportunity to meet executives at Fortune 100 companies to, a brand new startup out of somebody's house. So it's
Yeah.
been a tremendous opportunity for me to just learn about different industries and talk with different executives at all stages of their corporate life.
Yeah, I can't imagine what it's like when there's only 2 players and you're really just doing all the work that so many people probably can relate to in their sales or job, but you're really only it's a us or them.
Yeah,
What so that's, adds a unique layer that I'm sure a competitive landscape that you don't get in many other places.
right.
Do you have any stories or kind of things you can touch on that were moments of success or kind of understanding that this was the right role for you, that you knew you were good in this space, business development, you know, client retention, and it doesn't even have to relate to a specific company, but what was kind of that aha moment of like, okay, I found the right career or the right kind of skill set for myself?
I would say it came in two different ways, but both have a similar undertone, which is somehow over time, I became the internal go to for people. People would reach out and say, I'm new. I've heard this talk. I should talk to you. You do a
Mm,
great job. You are, very helpful. I mean, the nicest things that could be said were said. And that internal reputation really meant a lot to me because I started at NASDAQ, I think, as maybe one of 3,000 employees, and then it grew to maybe 10,000. So, I mean, it's a
wow.
big company,
Yeah.
and I was a remote employee. So, the fact that I had been able to create enough of an internal reputation that people felt comfortable not only coming to me, but referring new hires to me or referring other business units to ask questions was really a huge compliment. And I felt like, okay, I'm clearly doing something right if this
Right.
is internally. And then externally, I mean, selfishly, I loved hearing when my executives would go on meetings or if they'd met somebody in passing at a conference and they'd mention, oh, we work with Nicole, she's great, or we love NASDAQ. And, I think just I never sought that. I never sought for somebody to go say something about me, but the fact that it would get passed along just in conversation, or I was at least memorable enough for them to say something, obviously showed that like I had made some sort of an impression and not
Yeah.
just about me, obviously, but about the company that I was representing.
Right. So, with all that said, you're moving up the company, you're a valuable part of that team, and clients love you, and you obviously are happy you can stay there. How did the Texas Stock Exchange opportunity arise, and what got you excited about that offering that was enough for you to take a risk and go that route with saying yes?
Well, I had heard about it before I had anybody reach out, mainly
Mhm.
because, as you can imagine, working in the exchange space, you don't have new competitors come up every day.
That's right.
And and when they do, or when they had in the past, it was pretty quick to realize that maybe there wasn't the momentum behind
Mhm.
it. And I remember having somebody reach out to me in early 2024 asking about these rumors of a Texas stock exchange. And I hadn't heard anything. And I'm like, surely if anybody was going to know about it, it would be me, right? Because, I'm boots on the ground, but I clearly did not. And nothing really came of it until the Wall Street Journal article in, I think it was May of 2024, when
Mhm.
a great piece came out and ultimately helped everybody understand what this was, and I learned for the first time too, and I thought, "Gosh, you know, this is super interesting. I better keep an eye on it," because I could see in my current role at Nasdaq this being a concern.
Yeah.
And that is as far as I thought. I wasn't pursuing anything, and I
Mhm.
started getting recruited shortly thereafter, and I really hadn't followed up on any of it. I kinda thought it was spam, to be honest,
Yeah.
because they weren't
Yeah.
saying a lot about it, right? It was like, "We'd like to talk to you about an opportunity," or, "We'd like to talk to
Yeah.
you about your
Yeah.
car warranty." I mean, you know what I mean? It kinda sounded the same.
Right.
And finally, I responded, and it was a conversation after I had signed a non-disclosure with our CEO, Jim Lee, and he helped me understand truly the ethos behind what we are now building, which is a business-friendly exchange. We want to reinvigorate an industry, the public markets, that has
Mhm.
been complacent, and I was absolutely part of it. I would not go into a meeting where a lot of people love to see me coming because I represented Nasdaq, which was not that a bad brand, right? But it was increased cost, increased risk, compliance. It was not things that CEOs were super excited about, right? Because it just was a burden, and it still is a burden. And I also saw that, exchanges had become quasi regulators of these companies in addition to the SEC and the state government and the federal government. And I could see a decline in the amount of companies I was talking to that were truly going to go public. So
Mm.
firsthand, I knew what he was saying was true because I actually live that every single day.
Right.
So I kept the conversation going more just because I was intrigued that, gosh, I mean, is there a better mousetrap? Like, can this be
Yeah.
changed? Right? I mean, NASDAQ is now 55 years old, and the New York Stock Exchange is, I'm going to guess, 235 years old. I
Yeah.
mean, if it was going to change, why now? And I think, living in this state, going to companies based in the Southwest, there is a real opportunity to change people's mindset around the public markets and to be a part of building something that I have a very unique set of skills for
Mhm.
was undeniable. I couldn't turn it down. I have an opportunity now that my kids are a little bit older. I don't have to be that, at home
Mhm.
24/7
Mhm.
mom,
Yep.
and I can be part of something bigger than me and make an impact every day with decisions that are made or conversations that are had. And I get to work with truly some of the most veterans of industries I've ever met. I think the stat we have is 700 years combined exchange experience among the leadership here.
Wow.
And I mean, when do you get to work with the dream team like that?
Definitely. No, it sounds too exciting to turn up, and given your personality, what you've shared with us before, leading up to this point, it's an ideal fit. So how do you guys make that change? How do you fix that problem? You know, what what is it that you are building and doing now and into the future to solve those issues?
Yeah, I think it's a couple of different ways. First and foremost, what's broken? How do we identify the challenges that are fixable? And I think that is in a few ways. We've discovered obviously there's increased cost with being a public company, there's increased disclosures and litigation risk. And, ultimately, there is just a ton of additional work, so to speak, that an exchange can bring on. And we at the Texas Stock Exchange see this as an opportunity to actually be an advocate for business versus a hurdle for business.
Uh-huh.
Obviously, we want companies to be high quality, high standards. We want to signal to the market the investor confidence that these companies deserve. So we are an exchange for all, right? This is certainly an exchange for high standard companies. Of the
Mhm.
4,400 listed today, about 1,800 of them would not necessarily qualify just because of they fall below listing standards, trading
Yeah.
at below a dollar. It's not a healthy market for those
Yeah.
companies. And so when I say not for all, I'm not trying to be exclusionary in that we want those companies to survive. We want those
Yeah.
companies to do well. And we're unfortunately not allowing them to do so by keeping them listed for so long.
Right.
So for us, we see this as an opportunity to kind of right size how companies are treated on a public market and let them stay healthy.
Mm.
And so it's having high standards, but then it's also getting out of the way, like a true Texas fashion of we're going to let you run your business and we're going to go work for you. So we're going to go down to Austin. We're going to pass a capital markets package. We're going to go to the SEC. We're going to work with the commissioner as much as we can. We want to understand the pain points of companies and work on fixing those. And whether it's what was passed in earlier 2025, which allows companies to have an opportunity to incorporate in the state of Texas with the stronger business courts and the reduced risk and cost that can happen here now.
Uh-huh.
Or it's an alternative listing exchange, which is we want to give you access to the best markets in the world, the US public markets, and we want to do the work for you on behind the scenes. So we're not even open for business. And yet we have done a tremendous amount of work for companies already that are either incorporated here or headquartered here. So, that type of work is where an exchange, and I'm excited to be focused on, is advocating for businesses and advocating for them to be able to do it as easily as possible. We don't have to be a Texas company. We want to do this for a national
Yeah.
exchange. This is a national exchange, a completely electronic exchange that we are building from the ground up, and then a global exchange. I mean, Texas resonates so well, as you know, abroad. And, the idea of this Texas miracle is true. People have seen headquarters move here, companies expand here, population growth here, the talent, most of it from SMU, but also the other schools. And, ultimately, this is a place that's winning. And so is the Southeast Quadrant. That
Uh-huh.
mentality is true and it's working. And I think companies really see that that can exist even if I'm not based there. I can work with an exchange or partner with an exchange that allows me to have part of that in my life. And so that's really what we're focused on.
And so you're on the front lines. What's the sentiment you're getting from these corporations that you're talking to? I know, if you don't share anything you can't, but I mean, as timing comes, kind of what's the feedback they're giving you?
It has been unreal, the positivity. And I think I have yet to go on a meeting where there wasn't interest in more.
Uh,
Obviously, it's a long sales cycle to get a company to move requires, a lot of conversations, a lot of
mhm.
trust, a board approval. I mean, I'm not saying this is at all done. There are no contracts and
Right.
listings. So, for us, it's really going to be based off of how we can help people understand truly how their stock trades. So it's a lot of market conversations that a lot of these executives have actually never had. To your point and to my point earlier, I just thought like it happened. I don't know
Yeah.
how it happened,
Yeah.
but it happened. So really having them understand the portability and the liquidity that's available, but then also letting them know that there can be and there is room for a third option because
Uh-huh.
competition, as we all know, is super healthy for this market. We are here to have hopefully all boats rise with the tide that we are part of. And, if it makes business easier for companies that are listed on other exchanges, even better, because then that signals to other companies that they can go public too, hopefully all on Texie. But in the meantime, we just want to really create and facilitate a great public market environment.
Makes sense. So what are some milestones you can share to date?
Yeah.
I think a lot's changed since our January conversation, but what are some milestones the audience can kind of pencil down from now and in the next couple years?
Yes. So since I last saw you, we officially filed our Form 1 with the SEC. That will allow us to open trading and be part of the exchange traded ecosystem in mid to late Q1 of 2026. That will allow, again, for people to see that we can handle everything we say we're going to handle. From there, we will launch ETPs. ETPs are a $1 trillion industry, and certainly there needs to be another option for these exchange traded products to list. And so
Mhm.
we have a tremendous team that is supporting new and current ETPs. So that will be our biggest four milestones that you see
Yeah.
in the next year. IPOs for us will be late 26, early 27. But I think, we have a lot of milestones to hit before we
Seriously.
even get to 2027. But I'm also thrilled. I think something that will be fantastic for either the citizens that still live in Dallas of the SMU community or people that come back to visit and go to a football game. We will open up our Texas Market Center in 2027, which will be a world-class facility for celebrating your company, whether it's through a bell or a cannon, event space, all the fanfare that comes along with it, as well
Yeah,
as the Texas Business Museum. So highlighting the great accomplishments of Texas businesses over the course of its history. And obviously, many of them are probably graduates of SMU. So I will have a dedicated space, I'm going to force it, for just SMU grads and all their
that's great.
accomplishments.
I
Yeah,
love it. We'll be make sure to make the tours run through there daily.
please.
Make sure
Yes.
they have the right gear on.
And I won't
Before,
have any space for TCU. So it's fine.
no,
We
no,
will.
they can have a closet or something like that.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
well, I know you've been on the world tour talking this up and exciting that day by day gets closer and closer. Last little piece would be what's some things those business owners in town, SMU alumni, and then the kind of the graduates, those may be interested in working uh, for the Texas Stock Exchange that you would like to share as kind of this final piece.
So we are, at the end of the day, a startup. We are a well-funded startup with some tremendous backers, and we have moved into a very competitive space. But we are a startup, and so we are hiring, and we are looking for great people. I can't say how quickly or at what point we need a marketing person or a finance person or a HR person, but that is absolutely an opportunity. So, if there are folks, whether they're recent graduates or in the ecosystem, please feel free to reach out. I'm on LinkedIn and would be happy to have a conversation. That's the benefit, right? Is creating this business as we go. We get to find the right folks and create the right teams for each of these functions of the business. Beyond that piece of it, we are really eager to make sure that companies know, whether you're private or public, that you're not stuck. You have an opportunity to, at a minimum, better understand the markets, better
Mhm.
understand how things are working for them or not working for them, and at least get that education completed. I think for
Yeah,
us, we want people to understand what happens to a very important part of their business. We think Texie thinks we can do a much better job, but at a minimum, you should know what that job is.
yeah,
And so excited to have those conversations, always available, no matter what stage of life your company is in. We see this as a very long runway. We're here for the next several decades. So, whether you're a startup out of a garage today or you are a, $2 trillion company, happy to have you.
yeah. No, this has been awesome, Nicole. Thank you for always sharing as much as you can at each moment about the Texas Stock Exchange and what's happening. And it's in good hands now that you're in a decision role and helping out with the SMU mindset. So thank you for everything, and we look forward to our next update and watching you progress.
Well, thank you. I can't wait to have SMU come ring one of the bells and we'll have a big alumni celebration. So don't worry, you are not done with me yet.
I love it. Well, thanks again, and we'll see you soon. Thank you to our incredible sponsors, Security National Bank, Hilltop Property Tax, Mignon Steakhouse, Sound of a Rose podcast, and the SMU's Cox School of Business for making this all possible.